Thank you all for sticking around. I'm Leah Mcguire. I'm the tech lead for the automation and analytics teams within Benchling. Benchling is a cloud platform for the life sciences for biotechnology research and development. So the specific use case that I'm going to talk about today is a tool that we've built to automatically build models for our customers for optimizing the growth of biologics. So our customers are in laboratories that working on, in this particular use case, often producing components of drugs that are large molecules, so they can't be made through chemistry. You grow them up in something like yeast, and you want to basically have that process produce as much of this valuable drug component as possible. And this is a process that is very expensive and time-consuming. And so essentially, we are building a tool to help our customers do this faster. So before I actually get into how we do that, I'm just going to go off on a little bit of a rant around like what type of machine learning I'm talking about here and how I think it's useful for our customers. Then I'll talk about data and specifically a little bit about how Benchling helps our customers solve for data. Then I'll get into some of the details of how we actually do the modeling and what that means. And then I'll talk about how we put that back into the product as an interactive component so that we're actually helping our customers make decisions. So I don't think we should let machines make all of our decisions. And I guess before I even get into why that's the case, I want to just set the stage for the type of data that we're talking about here. So we're talking about something that someone physically does in a laboratory. It might cost thousands of dollars to do one run, produce like one data point on it. So it's very expensive. It's time-consuming. This is small data. This is a figure from a recent paper. It came out in July, basically showing deep learning not solving this for data sets with at least 3,000 rows. So like this is bigger than the data we're talking about. Really, we're in the small data regime, but it's valuable data. So in this regime, we're trying to build models for our customers. We know that the models may or may not work, right? And so the most important thing for this is really we want to make the models as transparent as possible. We have domain experts in the laboratory who know how this stuff is supposed to work. So if we show them what the model thinks, we show them that the patterns that the model can find, then we hope that the human can interpret that and actually use it to make decisions. So this is indeed a famous figure. Hopefully I'll give it at least a different talk track. So most organizations, when they start thinking about using ML, think about ML. They don't really grok the fact that they need to change the way they're gathering their data, that they need to start structuring it and being really rigorous about collecting it. They maybe think that like I could just build a model and then put it in a notebook repository where ideas go to die, and like there's a whole lot of stuff involved in putting this into a place where people can access it and really interact with it. And so one of the nice things about being a cloud computing platform is that we solve this for customers so that they can get some of the benefit of machine learning without actually going through the whole MLOps infrastructure. We had to do this. It's not the topic of this talk, but it was its own fun journey. So what Benchling does provide in this is it's a laboratory notebook that customers can record their experiments in. They can make templates of those experiments. They can define what results they want to collect from various things. They can keep track of things within the laboratory and really move that into a centralized database that they can then recall and use for things like machine learning. So this is the data part, right? Like you can't build a model without the data. And so part of this is education, and working with customers. As they start doing this, there's a whole team that basically goes in and helps customers set up what they want to record in experiments and define essentially their tables, define what happens in various things, help set up templates for experiments so that experiments will always follow the same ordering and path and have the same pieces recorded, which is, of course, the first step. But beyond that, there's things that sort of come into play, like sometimes people don't want to record what their media formulation was because it changes a lot. But if that's a really important thing in your process, you have to record it. And so like getting that sort of information included is one of the challenges that we're working through and hoping to get better at. So what Benchling does do is give customers a really flexible way to put their data in to Benchling. And so because they go and define the individual tables and every column in that as part of the setup process and enablement process, it's capable of capturing their unique systems, which is great for them. It is not necessarily great if you're trying to build models on it. It presents a lot of challenges if you have no idea what the data you're trying to build a model on looks like. And so that is the specific problem that we are solving with modeling here. So we actually have a system. The system takes in a number of components. It takes in things that the customers tell us. It takes in decisions that we've made based on the fact that we know that they are probably trying to grow something in a lab with some, chemicals over time for a run. And so we know a lot of things about how those models should work. And then we put it through a pipeline that does joining and feature extraction. It does the label creation. It does a whole lot of data cleaning because it turns out that people do bad things to data or accidentally add things to data. It does sort of some standard AutoML things, and then we spend a really, really long time on model explanations. So what this looks like first off is we have an interface, a UI, where the customer can look at the tables that they've put into Benchling, select the ones that they think are important, say which features they want to include, and tell us this is the measure we're trying to optimize. If it's the optical density of the sample, or if it's the actual measurement of like how much of the thing they produced, they tell us that. We say, great, now we know your tables. We pull it all out, and we run it through our process. So the customer does this UI, they give us a config, we take that config, we add in our own configs for what kind of models we want to use, what kind of featurization we know is important for this particular process. So we know we have to treat time series in a particular way. We know which kinds of aggregations we want to do, which kinds of transformations. We do a lot of data cleaning. We select tree models because they work. And we select particular cross-validation. So in this use case, it's actually batch effects. So people run these experiments sort of like week by week by week. And if you look at across weeks, the effects are often larger than the actual parameter variations. And so you have to do cross-validation that takes that into account and do grouping based on batches. And then we spend more time actually generating model explanations than we do on the models. And so the way we're doing this is with a number of open source tools. We use Feature Tools, which is an open source library. It has an algorithm called deep feature synthesis, which basically allows us to take those relationship specifications that the customer is given and our definitions of what kinds of feature engineering we want to do on particular data types, and it automatically generates a feature matrix, which is beautiful. It makes a lot of features, and then we have to do cleaning on those features that we've automatically generated. And so we use another open source library for this, which is called evalML. And the nice thing about evalML is that while it does AutoML and will put your data through a pipeline and do Bayesian optimization to find the best model, it allows very specific injection of pipeline steps. It allows specification of which models you want to run in your tournament and which hyperparameter ranges you want to do. And so it's very easy to inject some domain knowledge on the question instead of just running it blindly through an AutoML system. And then, of course, it has a number of nice data cleaning utilities that let us do things like detect multicollinear features that we've automatically generated and exclude some of those automatically generated features. It does things like look for some clues for label leakage and allow you to try and exclude those or raise warnings to the users that maybe they've actually included, an unnormalized version of their label in there, and they might want to fix that. And we get a model. And once we have that model, we then go and generate explanations. So we use SHAP because we're using tree models, and SHAP is sort of the darling of tree models. But we also do things like permutation importance, feature interactions, and we do straight up figures to look at the features and the label over time so that customers can see their data and actually think about what's going on and use it, hopefully, to make decisions. So once we've done all of this in our modeling pipeline, we then take this back and put it in front of the user. So we want them to be able to try and make a decision with this. And so what we do is put it back. Oh, first, the reason we want them to be able to make a decision with this. So machines are really good at picking up patterns. A machine might think that cancer causes cell phones. Looks like a good pattern. But a human might look at this data and think that maybe there's some underlying thing like industrialization that actually is the cause. And so that human reasoning is really great to have in the process for expensive decisions that need to be made. And machines are really good at finding patterns that humans might not be able to see by just looking at the data. And so the idea is that hopefully we'll be able to combine the good parts of machines with the good parts of humans and make this better. So we have a dashboard to start, basically visualizing the data of the customers. It's sort of a high-level summary. These are the important features. These are what they look like on individual runs, how they contribute, the relationship of individual features with the label and with the prediction, or with the prediction contribution, and allowing drill down on this. And of course, the idea is that once you do this, you can identify problems with the model. And the reason for this is that basically we want to allow iteration on the model. So models often are not great on the first try. The idea is that once they see that their top feature is actually the unnormalized label, they can go back to this step and say, actually, don't include that in the model. Or, oh, look, there was this week when the media was contaminated and everything died. I should probably filter that out. And so we want the customers to be able to look at the data, iterate, make a better model, and do this based on their domain knowledge of, they're a fermentation engineer in the laboratory. They're doing this all the time. They know which features they actually can affect, which features should be important. And once they've done that, then hopefully they've got a model that they can trust, and we give them the ability to interact with it. So the idea is that customers can go in, change particular feature values, see what they are, see what the model predicts will happen. We give them a confidence measurement so that they can know whether or not the model is just guessing or it actually was trained on something similar, and do sort of the in silico experiment before they decide to go into the laboratory and spend the money to do the run. And help them make this a faster, cheaper process. So that's the hope. We've done the modeling in pilot with a number of customers, and we're actually releasing this in beta with the full interactive set very soon. And so we'll find out whether or not we've actually made a useful product, but that is the hope. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Leah. Any questions on the other side there?
Hey, I really loved your presentation. So I have two questions. The first is, as you can develop these like really nice analytics dashboards, right? Kind of like showcasing, hey, here's the summary and here are the features. What are your thoughts on using that to actually make recommendations on the next type of experiments set up within a laboratory? And then how does like could simulation potentially play into that to kind of like save money ahead of time? And then the second question I have is, as you're building out these new products in terms of making these recommendations on what kinds of like systems work well, you create a marketplace for other individuals within like an ecosystem to figure out, hey, I've already run that experiment. You can monetize this and sell it to these other clients.
Yeah, so we definitely do have plans. So we have the interactive dashboard, and assuming that customers, or sorry, the interactive dashboard and the interactive step where they can actually change parameters to see what would happen. We do have plans to expand that to do more simulation, different types of modeling for optimization to help them figure it out, sort of in the future. As for like combining customer data, that's always the sticking point for this. So like, pharma companies don't want to share their data. We've definitely, so with our pilots, we like one-off asked questions like, if we made a global model, would you be interested in participating? And I think some biotechs thought that they might be interested in that. And I think there's different levels of sensitivity on the data. So it might be possible to do like an opt-in for very common things that people are less proprietarily sensitive about.
Yeah, kind of like a Netflix subscription for these, you know,
Yeah.
items to use. And then actually I have one more question if that's okay. How often do you like really dig into like the domain? Like let's say that one particular group is like using Cas19 to kind of like create these new like sequences of DNA to solve like a unique problem. And how much can like machine learning help out with really, really specific experiments?
So, so I should say this is the first ML product that Benchling is working on. There will be more to come. So there are some things that we think can be useful. So, for instance, Benchling has done a lot with like CRISPR tools in order to make those more accessible to customers. We have a beta where we're allowing customers access to AlphaFold. In terms of like the very specific things that customers are doing themselves, because that's so close to their IP, there's maybe less appeal to them for us to approach it.
Sounds very cool. Thank you.
Hello there. Thank you for the presentation. I'm in a neighboring domain, and that's in clinical trials. So you help develop the therapeutic, and then we help to test it. I'm interested in understanding, well, since you're just beginning to think about it, what kind of instrumentation you might include such that you understand that your application is actually helping and not frustrating.
Yeah.
To the degree that you can, what does that look like to you?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot in there in terms of basically setting up the system to, once we get beyond the point where you've maybe fiddled with some numbers to see whether or not you want to run an experiment, enabling the setup for that, tracking the output, and then actually validating in the real world, like whether or not the model was good. I think there's also some work that we can do in terms of setting up, of doing, like allowing true validation for the customers. So right now we're pulling data that they've entered into our databases, but you know, allowing them to upload a spreadsheet of the experiments that they haven't run first, and see the results of those, and then you know, following up. And so really, like, I think the answer is that we need to start getting tracking of when the experiments happen and separation of the labels really well. And then ideally, what we can do is have playback before we actually show the customer the model, and then allow them to see the results of true validation. So initial experiments that they do, we want to show them, all right, we said this would come out like this, here's what actually happened. So it'll be a journey, but it's definitely one that we're thinking about. Yeah.
I was thinking also what we're looking at is like feedback from the customer as to like sentiment around different experiences.
Yeah, well, so we did an initial pilot with the customers, so we worked very closely with a number of customers to see whether or not they thought the model made sense, whether or not they would use it, trying out different pieces. And then with the beta, we're expanding that to get feedback. So like, it's a relatively small industry, so we like handhold to do the sentiment measurements.
Thank you for your talk. That was very insightful. My question for you is, how is Benchling thinking about the complexity that exists within the different data types in this field, be it a chromatography or a microscopy type of imaging, to kind of go along with these spreadsheets or more tabular data that they're entering as well?
Yeah, so I think it is a goal, and actually part of the automation part of automation and analytics is around integrating with the different data types that come out of laboratory equipment and machines. It's interesting and challenging because there are some standards, but not universally adopted standards. So every machine sort of comes up with its own format. And we don't want to be in the situation of like adding one more standard to that. But we are attempting to target specific machines to integrate with the hope that as we make that easier, more systems will join the club and have some standards on what those different formats look like. So we're accepting some, and we're hoping to accept more.
Thank you.
Thanks for the great talk. I have one question about the model explanation. The explanation piece, is that more for validation of the model to build trust with the user, or is it more like, say, for discovery?
Discovery in terms of like seeing which features were important. Yeah.
It's more about discovery?
Well, it is for both. I think both are important reasons to show the customer what's happening in the model. So I think for instance, in the pilots, there were many things that came up as early features that were both interesting to the customer in that they were like indicative of some process thing and not particularly helpful in the model. And so it's both to build trust in that the model is picking up features that the expert thinks should be important, and to help them discover, I guess, things in their data that are, well, to help them discover which features the model thinks are important, but also like particular pieces of their process that they may not think are useful. For example, if a particular probe ID tends to have different readings, that kind of thing is like a useful insight and discovery, but not necessarily useful for the model. So it can serve multiple purposes.
I throw one extreme philosophical question. Suppose the machine learning model can find out some pattern, which is, do you believe that there might be some cases is beyond human understanding? So that's why like I ask, like, would explain if some new patterns really there, like, could that even be explainable to human beings?
Well, I think it is possible that a machine could pick up a pattern that a human can't. I think in this case we're limiting to pretty simple models deliberately, and so I don't know. I think it could certainly pick up patterns that were difficult for us to explain. My hope would be that you know, with enough iteration, we can get something that, even if we can't fully explain it to the customer, they can gain some ability to act on it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Thank you so much, Leah. Great
Thank you.
presentation.